Thanks for taking the time out of the busy week. Back-to-back meetings and everyone has running all over San Francisco. So thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. I have the great pleasure of introducing three great organizations that we've been able to work alongside that are at varying stages of their transformation journey of really trying to think differently about the HR function, HR processes, and how we can best deliver really great service to the organization. So quick round of introductions before we dive into the fun content. My name is Ann Blakely. I lead the Human Capital Services function for Baker Tilly. We're a partner to Oracle and help organizations really drive change and rethink work. With me today, I've got three great panelists from three great organizations. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Megan.
Good morning. My name is Megan Glatt. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition Programs with Medtronic. Medtronic is a global medical technology and services organization with over 85,000 employees in 150 countries. So I've had the benefit of partnering with Baker Tilly on 2 global implementations in just a 2-year period of time. So got to do that back-to-back through an acquisition. Absolutely. So
Awesome.
happy to be here.
Thanks, Megan. Robin?
So my name's Robin Myers. I'm a Global Director of HR Shared Services and Technology for Quad Graphics. Quad Graphics is predominantly a core print, so your magazines and flyer inserts, but also moving into the digital and packaging areas as well. We are in the midst of our transformation and actually just went live within the last 3 weeks on recruiting, learn, and onboarding, and we have the full suite going over the next 18 months. So we are kind of right in the throes of all of that. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Brady?
Hi, I'm Brady Jensen. I'm Head of HR Operations and Service Delivery for Willis Towers Watson. Willis Towers Watson was formed on January 4 by the merger of Willis, a global insurance brokerage, and Towers Watson, a global healthcare benefits, human capital, and risk consulting firm. And along the way, we acquired a French company, Gras Savoye, so we have about 42,000 people, we think, we're not really sure, in 90 countries, or maybe 120, we're not really sure. And we are just really early stages of implementation for the full suite of core human capital management, absence management, and applicant tracking. We'll start the go-lives mid-year next year and continuing into 2018.
Awesome, thank you. So let's dive into it. Obviously, all three organizations have grown pretty significantly through mergers and acquisitions. Maybe share a little bit about whether or not the mergers and acquisitions really drove the need for this transformation. Was it driven by other needs in the organization? What really drove the sense of urgency?
So definitely, this is actually the second time that I personally and that our firms have done this. 6 years ago, Towers Watson itself was created by a merger of Towers Perrin and Watson Wyatt, and that provided the context or opportunity or driving need to implement a new core HR system. And similarly with the merger of Willis, we have another need to create a global system and use that as the springboard for our transformation, our move to the cloud at the same time. So I think for us, and we were talking about this yesterday, that the merger, it's hard to make the business case oftentimes for an HR investment, and the merger sort of creates the platform and the need, regardless of whether you can demonstrate the positive ROI that you would like to see, because it becomes foundational and almost a must-do for the company.
Yeah, for Medtronic, it was certainly a critical driver. When Medtronic acquired Covidien, the organization doubled in size. So both organizations were about 45,000 employees. Across Medtronic, there was 3 applicant tracking systems in place, so critical certainly to reduce the operating costs and get a good handle on the data on a global scale. So a real drive for consistency as far as the overall processes, and data and metrics, we're concerned as well, so.
So Brady can figure out if they actually have 42,000 employees.
Exactly, and for Quad Graphics, it's been a while since we went through a major acquisition. I wanna say it's probably been 5 or 6 years. We were 7,000 employees, family-owned business, that with the acquisition of World Color went to 21,000 employees and became publicly traded organization at the same time. So a lot of change took place then, but really now, I think we're to the point where we're trying to expand our footprint, and we're moving into the digital space and into packaging space, and now is when we really need to start driving some of that transformation and looking at the technology to do that.
So more infrastructure to scale, getting ready for a tear.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. The next topic I wanted to talk a little bit about, and we've been hearing this constantly in customers, shared services. So all three of you are in the process, varying stages of building out HR shared services organizations. And I feel like we go through these cyclical periods in time where we decentralize everything, see how that works for a while, then we bring it all back in. Help us understand sort of where you are in that shared service journey, what drove the need to try to centralize some of those operations, and maybe just share a little bit of details of your shared service organization. Are you doing that globally? Where have you decided to make those locations? Just share some details as organizations are thinking about this.
So I'll go ahead and go first. Medtronic does have a shared service model, as well as a center of excellence model. So we've got our tier 1 support, which is a call center, and we've got 4 locations globally where we've got those located. So our approach was to have those call centers where we have our physical locations within the geographies. So there's one in Mansfield, Massachusetts, which covers Latin America and North America. We also have Shanghai as well as Singapore, and then Prague that supports EMEA. In support of that shared service function, we have our centers of excellence. So each HR function has a small team that sets the global strategic direction for the function, and then certainly does the knowledge transfer and support, this shared service organization. It's a model that's worked really well for us. We actually had it implemented within Covidian, and now leadership at Medtronic has chosen to adopt the model as well. It's a real, I'd say the driver was certainly around that consistent experience for all stakeholders and the economies of scale. So make sure that we've got, the right people doing the right work in the right locations. And certainly that kind of broad-based knowledge base and shared service, but, kind of the core function setting that strategic direction. So getting away from that kind of generalist model. And having a smaller group set that strategic direction.
So Willis and Towers Watson were interestingly almost mirrors of each other. So we had a blend in our large countries, the United States and the United Kingdom. We had employee service centers, and then we had each created an offshore location in India that was increasingly used to offshore certain processes. And over the 5 years that I led this at Towers Watson, we went from 3 to 20 people, which over 5 years, sort of onesie, twosie at a time. On the other hand, in the rest of the world, in all of our other countries, things were very decentralized, and we have local HR administrators who are part of an in-country HR team. And our plan is to draw down that decentralized function and migrate more of that work to global service centers. So in addition to our US and UK locations, which will continue to serve at least some level of functions within the countries, we'll continue to grow our India operations and also open a location in Manila where we have a large finance shared service center, and use that as kind of a hub for Asia. But increasingly, India is really our global hub, and we look to centralize as much as possible work in our 2 India centers.
Yeah, so for us, I would say Quad Graphics had an employee call center that we set up probably 10 years ago, so where we may have been slightly ahead of the curve when we did that 10 years ago, we haven't moved past that to this point. So Megan talked about the COE model. We're setting up a structure that's very similar to that, so it's all about the operations, the HR business partner structure, and then the COEs. And we are really predominantly focused on developing that tiered structure for shared services, and then working on the HR business partner side to transform their roles and their focus, and identifying the type of transactional work that's taking place out in the field, which is very challenging.
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. You know, it's interesting in my experience. Everybody wants to focus on the operations of their shared services side, and are you going to be able to handle this? And we haven't always done the best job of defining what that HR business partner role looks like, and then making sure that we've got the right skill sets there as well, so that they're comfortable in understanding where they're going, and they don't try to hang on to that work and not let it move into the operations side of the house. So we're spending a lot of time right now partnering with my peers on the business partner side, defining their roles and responsibilities, and then starting that change management process with the business leaders, because of course they want their partner that's right there beside them all the time, doing whatever they need done at the site. And we are looking to move from roughly a 1 to 250 ratio to a 1 to 5 to 600 ratio, which is going to be a huge change at a lot of our mega plants, where we have several thousand employees at each location. And then at the same time, we're doing that same exercise on the shared services side. So we're literally going through and reevaluating all of the roles, all of the skill sets that we have, and then mapping those skill sets, because it's not necessarily everybody can do everything anymore because of our size, and we need to get that scalability. So we're going through and doing those talent assessments and matching all that as well at the same time that we're looking and identifying the work that we can bring in.
On the heels of setting up the actual structure of the shared service organization and all the work to try to just figure out where is HR work happening, who's doing what do we consider transactional versus, maybe something that requires a little bit more high touch. Usually the next conversation that comes up is, okay, well, what exactly are our future state processes going to look like, in the new world after we get through this transformation? We have this, beautiful global view of everything. Organizations, I think, really struggle with how much autonomy do we give the geographies or the business units or, just various populations, how much autonomy do we give them to define their own processes versus how much, sort of global common model, standardization do we want to try to drive so that we can facilitate shared services and those kinds of things. So maybe talk about that interplay of, how much autonomy do we give, to have input into process versus how much do we, sort of dictate from a common model perspective, and just sort of what that tug and feels like.
I think it's if you remember Dr. Doolittle, it's the two-headed llama, the push me, pull you. And I think that's actually kind of the idea of finding some balance. I mean, I think one of the experiences at both Willis and Towers Watson is we gave a great deal of autonomy to the local operations. And I think there's value in that, in the ability to be culturally appropriate and sensitive to kind of fit to the local operations. Many of these cases, we've got 200 or fewer people, so HR sometimes has a very broad role. What we found, however, is that really limits our ability to scale, and some of the concepts that we had, for example, that we could use administrators in one country to back up the administrators in another country didn't work if they were doing things in a quite different manner, and it was difficult to share knowledge and to make improvements in a way that then could be leveraged across the globe when everybody does it slightly differently. And even our service centers operated differently. So I think, now what we're doing is trying to pull some of that requirements from the standpoint of truly no kidding, not the myth, what has to be specific and unique to this particular country versus how much can we really push a global approach and standardize that to allow better scale and efficiency across the company. And scale really is such a critical factor, because when in many countries where we went from 200, from under 200, when you doubled that, now we're 400, 500. When Robin told me they were striving for an employee ratio of like 1 to 400, I was like, then they were at 250. I thought if I could only get there, that would be success. But it is that, now that we have larger locations, we get better scale, but still looking for how we can make the operations more uniform globally to take advantage of that bigger scale that we now have.
I think we are looking to set up another center in Poland. We've got 3 locations where we operate there today, and we're in the process of identifying which one of those 3 locations we're going to be setting up our shared services to support the European space. But we're really trying to operate from the perspective that if we can get 80% defined in that global common model, the Quad's language is focused a lot around freedom within the frame. So we're trying to set one frame and get 80% in there from a standard process perspective, and then give some of that flexibility. But we're focusing on the U.S. in particular right now. I think when we've got a good opportunity to make sure that we're tapping into the European side and starting to pull them in early on as we move into the next phase of the transformation. So the goal is to get them pulled in ahead of time and get some solid resources identified to partner with us along the way, because I think having those conversations up front gives us a better shot at making sure that we're getting that framework that we're looking for.
Yeah, Medtronic is striving for a lot of global consistency across this, across the COEs as well as the shared service model. So much so that each of the COEs did a lot of process re-engineering work over the past year to really take a look at, again, kind of what are those processes and how can we make them common, and what work can be shifted to shared services as well. And before it gets shifted to shared services, it needs to be documented and repeatable as well, so that they can provide that level of support. But I think it's really more so striving for that global consistency and only deviating for regulatory and legal purposes in those local markets. Again, it really helps us from an overall infrastructure and data standpoint, to have that case management system and see where the volume's at. And then we've even gone as far as developing a service delivery catalog with all the HR kind of transactions and functions in the full RACI to support that. So we've done a lot of work to get pretty crisp, as far as what those processes are in the ownership.
And if I kind of tack onto that, because I think you mentioned a big thing, the case management piece.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that we haven't had at Quad, and was something that we implemented just in June. And the value that the data that we've been able to get from that has been a huge factor in determining how we lay out our approach and our roadmap going forward. Because now we're not operating off of, or guessing off of, counting emails to try to get a handle on what types of issues we're seeing and where they're coming from and how we can respond to those. So, and that all ties back to that standard process and building out a knowledge base and going for the self-service, that tier 0 as well.
You guys focus a lot on, sort of the efficiency, the economies, having good data as sort of a driver for global common model. What about the employee and the manager experience? Because I think what we're hearing a lot is that, you don't, oftentimes a manager doesn't just have responsibility for somebody that's, 4 cubes down from me. It's increasingly, distributed teams, across business units, across geographies, et cetera. So maybe talk a little bit about it, the employee and manager experience. Is that also a driver for trying to centralize some of these processes?
It's a huge driver for us. We've, as we looked at the technology, and one of the reasons that we selected what we did select was really making sure that we can we can enhance the user experience for the managers and the employees, and making sure that they have access to information readily available, and making it easy for them to operate. And I think if we can achieve that through the technology, but then also get to that common model, that's our goal. We've got a lot of custom homegrown built types of systems that are just breaking right now because we have grown so much. So spending a lot of time talking about what that user experience needs to be and how they can access that information, and then we can support that from the back end, and get our processes done, but a lot of focus on the user experience.
Yeah, I again, kind of having done this before 5 years ago, I think, and having then operated in an environment and having to take responsibility. And I used to be a consultant, so I used to be able to slam it in and leave. And
He was on the dark side.
And yeah, now that I actually, own responsibility for it, you kind of, you have the opportunity to watch what it is, and I think the lesson that I took from operating in our old environment for 5 years was the importance of that manager experience, because it really leads so quickly back into the frustrated call or the email or the escalation, if we're not thinking about a process really from the manager's perspective, not from our perspective. And my favorite example, and I'm a manager, so I use I have a large team, and I can't figure out how to do things. And if I figure if I can't figure out how to make it work, and I'm responsible for it, how does anybody else do that? And we had in a design session last week, we were talking about, well, we have a gift card process, and you use that if it's under $500, and then we have a spot bonus process, and you use that if it's over $500, and one goes over here and one goes over there, and they each have different approvals, and they route, and I'm thinking, if a manager can't figure that out, how are they going to find that as an experience that's effective, and it just we get in their way, and so. The technology, we can use the technology more sensitively, and I think that's where that experience piece becomes really critical. And it works to our benefit, right? Because a simple process for the manager is probably pretty simple and efficient for us too. So it's actually a good lens to say, we're improving our own operational efficiency.
Yeah, I think it goes back to your point, increasingly people have global teams, and that really drives home the need for that standardization and consistent experience regardless of geography or business as well. So, it's certainly a critical consideration for us, and it is a change for managers and employees to not have that HR partner, right next door that they can tap into for anything. But we're really, I think it's an improvement, certainly, that they've got one phone number to call for benefits, payroll, recruitment, any question that they may have. We've got a lot of work going on right now, too, to build out that kind of tier 0 self-service portal where they can go in and very easily kind of search a topic and see what information is available. And if it's not there, immediately connect, through the technology with the shared service organization. So it is a critical consideration, and again, I think kind of hits home that point for that consistent experience.
So once you get to the point to agree, okay, we are gonna try to strive for this global common model, whatever percentage of, whether it's 80% or 90% or whatever, let's try to drive this global consistency, or just, consistency across different business units and other locations, et cetera, even if it's not global. A little bit easier said than done. Can you share some, just sort of tactics, what design principles did you have to put in place, what kind of guardrails did you have to put in place in order to actually accomplish that? Maybe just some different tactics that you put in place during the implementation to try to facilitate that. And also just sort of curious, who do you invite to that party or not, and why? Because I think we have organizations that sort of swing both ways. Either it's very much a push model, we're going to have a really closely held core team, we're going to find all the processes and we're going to just hand them to everyone, Or, we've got other people that wanna have, all kinds of input, whether it's from locations or business units, et cetera, and really, be part of that design and then, distribute it that way. So just kind of curious, lessons learned and how do you actually get there?
Yeah, I think it was a kind of a two-pronged approach for us. I mean, we really did try and start with what we considered best practice and have people react from there. It was a much quicker path forward than trying to gather all the current processes and do that kind of fit gap analysis. So we really did start with what we considered best practice and went out and we had representation from the businesses and the regions, to react and say, why would this not work for you? And really, I think, some of the guiding principles were certainly to strive for best practice regardless of legacy, kind of practices. And to try and remain consistent and like I said, only deviate for that regulatory or legal need, in the business. And surprisingly, it was very well received. I think it was a great couple-day session that we sat down and we did that full kind of review of the full TA processes and metrics. So it wasn't met with as much as resistance as we first thought, kind of going at it in that manner.
Still somewhat early for us, but one of the key mechanisms on both the talent acquisition and the core HR side, we have geographic leads for our 4 geographies and then a global lead. We use those 5 people, 5 on HR, the service delivery, 5 on talent acquisition, as that sort of fulcrum between, again, that push and that pull. They're ultimately accountable for delivery of service in their geography, and some of those include, many countries, and they're responsible to go and understand what the needs are and maybe what's unique within the geography. But then that gives us a small manageable group that can reach consensus and that can make decisions, and then turn around and advocate for those within the geography.
Yeah, it's a little early on for us as well. As I said, we just went live with phase 1, which was a smaller set of changes, and I would say we took the approach that we did the push on that. I think we're going to change that approach as we move into the next phase, just because it is so much larger and it's going to be more impactful across the organization. So really wanting to get out in front of that and identify key stakeholders in each one of those regions and areas and members of the business, and have them come in and be part of that.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Definitely, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just curious, when you're, a lot of organizations are grappling with, okay, so we build a global common model, who gets to participate in that? Is it truly everyone? Do we draw the line somewhere? But then when we roll it out, can we then only roll it out to the people that we've, solicited response from? Or, how do we handle some of those maybe smaller populations, smaller business units where, not that we don't care about their opinion, but we kind of don't care about their opinion, just because it doesn't represent, the what's good for the greater good. So talk about kind of what are your deployment tactics there?
So we started by defining first off, it is literally the 80-20 rule. So we found 12 countries, and this aligned with the way in which we're rolling out our harmonized compensation program. Our 12 largest countries are 78.5% of our total worldwide population. So we really focus on those 12 countries. And then there's kind of a break point where we said, well, kind of what about where's it 300 people? And we said, and that gets us another 9 countries when we go down to anybody greater than 300. And then, so that's 20 countries, and that leaves 70 countries that have less than 300, and some of those are in single digits. And so our strategy is that, and the 300 was sort of that threshold where we said, probably big enough to consider special needs around integration or maybe reporting. The 12 countries definitely large enough that we need to be really thorough in our system support, payroll, and so forth. And under that 300, that threshold, it's a little bit of you'll take what we give you, and it's probably better than the spreadsheets you're using. And then over time, you know, I think this is helpful in prioritizing, but, you know, the project finishes, but the work still goes on. And so we can look at, again, how do we continue to meet the needs of some of those smaller countries. But literally, most of them are, there's 40 countries in Africa that were in the French acquisition that we made, and they literally operate on spreadsheets. So just going to a system is the big change. So everything from that point forward will be, you know, later and, you know, in due time.
Then you have the challenge of making sure that they use the system and don't go back to the spreadsheet.
Yeah, you know, we, one of the things that you often hear, especially in these distributed models, is that, you know, people are really concerned about making payroll correct. So the payroll system will be right and the HR system won't. But our bonus program is global and calculated from the center. So if you're not doing things accurately in HR, then your bonuses aren't going to be accurate. So and people really care about having accurate bonuses. Yeah, yeah. It was like if you're looking for a stick, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
So obviously we've talked a lot about global transformation. There's a lot more going on outside of just the technology. You know, you've got, you know, we're trying to understand roles and responsibilities, who's doing what, who should be doing it, let's get work in the right hands. We're talking about consistency for employees, the experience for managers, you know, let's make their jobs easier, not harder, because we seem to be piling a lot on them these days. Talk about the role of technology in all this. So, you know, you've got a lot of other work that's happening to define the processes and define those teams and get those teams set up, et cetera. But, you know, why cloud, why now, what role did the technology play in being able to enable all of this for you?
I'll go ahead and go. So I think it's really the enabler that you know, drives the consistency. You know, the cloud-based model is certainly flexible, so that when we want to make enhancements, you know, for the organization and to meet kind of some of those, you know, ongoing needs.
When you double in size again?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got that, you know, capability certainly for the adoption and the expansion with it as well. So I think that was a big driver for us, and the data, you know, as well. So getting back to whether it's the case management system or overall metrics and effectiveness and efficiency, you know, the data is what you've got to have to really kind of do that due diligence and improve.
I know, Brady, for you guys, you were really debating, you know, you're a long-time EBS, really sophisticated EBS user, you know, why move to the cloud now versus wait until later, et cetera, and, you know, that was a big factor for you guys.
Well, I think, again, part of it's opportunistic. I probably would never have the ability to go make the case for just hey, it's time, let's move to the cloud, that'd be fun.
It's pretty, it's mobile.
So there's a certain window of opportunity that was created. But I think that beyond that, for us, for both Willis and Towers Watson, and now when you put the two of us together, the pathway to growth is through a lot of business development and corporate development. So we'll continue to do acquisitions. God, I hope we don't double in size again. I'm sure I'm, you know, like
Third time's a charm.
yeah, I'm not sure I'm equipped to do another one, but certainly mergers, you know, we've done a number of mergers, both of us, divestitures, we've spun groups off, and I think that where we started to see was that our ERP system was a barrier to the ability to accomplish those quickly, and in fact, we finished the migration of one of our acquisitions into our EBS environment the day we closed the merger with Willis, and that acquisition had been made 2.5 years earlier. So, you know, it took us that long and $4 million to bring them into the fold, and we just can't do that on a repetitive basis, and nor can we operate these, you know, companies, you know, like they're out there somehow. So we really needed a platform that allowed us to be far more agile in the way in which to support the way in which our business will continue to change and grow. And I think that's a big change from 6 years ago when we started the Towers Watson journey, is realizing just how much that's going to be a driver, and how that had to inform the way in which we build the system from the ground up.
I think, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday as well, but the whole thought process around spending millions of dollars to do an upgrade that takes, potentially a year plus to have those upgrades go in, and just that flexibility with moving to the cloud that, we can have the business owners and the functional users on the HRS side be able to do that configuration and change more quickly, while we're basically enabling the managers and the employees to do so much more on their own immediately. But then we've also been looking at the fact that we do all of our data entry in-house as well. So I have a staff of people who do nothing but data entry, and the goal is, with implementing this technology, is that, we're automating all of our workflows. The approvals aren't through emails that we're copying and pasting somewhere else to record all of it for SOX. So just taking all of that complexity out is a big component for us as well.
Awesome, thank you. I think we have a few minutes left, so I'm gonna open it up for questions. Any things that you're curious to hit them with from the group? Yeah, please.
Here's what case management system you went with?
We went with Oracle Service Cloud,
You did, okay.
yes.
We have Towers Watson has a proprietary product that we market, that we implemented at Towers Watson, obviously. But we are migrating to ServiceNow across all of corporate. The product that we have is really more focused on HR, and so we're looking at, again, the integration across all of the corporate functions, kind of a single manager experience. Manager shouldn't have to know, well, I wonder who answers this question.
Right.
Yeah, Medtronic uses ServiceNow as well.
There'll be an announcement coming out in HCM World too, that the HCM Cloud Help Desk, actually on the HCM platform, is coming out, version 12.
So I had to laugh because that was right after we signed for Service Cloud. So we were sitting there at HCM World, and I immediately turned around and looked at our sales rep and said, "Really?"
You couldn't have waited a year though.
No, we could not have waited a year.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. You guys have all done this, and it's been rolling for a while. What have you done to get feedback to see if it has had a positive effect, and what's the perception from management of the new value add that this process is adding? Any comments there?
Well, for us, the first thing that we came out with was the new LMS, and we rolled Code of Conduct. That was the first thing that we launched with. So our legal partners were absolutely thrilled, and the feedback that we've received back from managers and employees has been very positive as well. From a shared services perspective, as far as like the case management, we've been getting fairly positive feedback. We're running surveys. We've done a lot of setting up a lot of type of focus group conversations with employees and managers to get some of that information back, and we're doing webinars, and we have a whole set of change management communications and feedback opportunities that we've built into the process. So far it's been pretty positive, and the opportunities that we've received back, we've been able to work on and communicate that back out. So far everybody's really happy and excited about everything that's going on for us.
Megan, you've had some pretty crazy metrics in terms of like improving a lot of candidate drop off and just recruitment efficiency and those things. Maybe you can speak to some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we implemented the new global ATS, we were seeing, I would say, roughly a 30% drop off rate, as far as the overall experience. But now we've seen that below 10% globally. So pretty good successes there, and very similar, I think, to what Robin is doing. A lot of mechanisms to get feedback, whether it be through the surveys, the focus groups, People are not shy about giving the feedback, good, bad, and, ugly in some cases, but we are constantly focused on trying to improve and further enhance the overall experience and functionality and capability to make it a simple process.
Anybody else? Yeah, please.
It sounds like, at least in the case of Medtronic and Willis, that you had an opportunity to start from the ground up. Was it always an Oracle decision, or did you look seriously at other solutions?
So, like I said, I got to do 2 global implementations back to back. So with Covidian, it was a consistent focus on the Oracle system. We were, using the PeopleSoft ATS, and then, Taleo was certainly kind of best in class and gave us that flexibility that we needed for such a large global organization. Now when Medtronic purchased Covidian, and we had 3 applicant tracking systems in play, Medtronic's core HCM is actually Workday. So there was the discussion between, the Workday ATS and Taleo. But ultimately, I think, for us, the Workday system was just not as mature, where it needs to be, again, to meet the needs of the organization at this time. So there was a little bit of, due diligence done certainly on that second implementation, but, Oracle was the right solution.
A lot of our logic was driven by finance, which is also Oracle, and so we're basically all, an all Oracle enterprise from at least an applications perspective. So we did evaluate alternatives in the applicant tracking space, but ultimately the desire to keep everything somewhat consistent, harmonized, integrated was the driver for us.
Robin wasn't at Quad when they made the decision, so.
No, but it was interesting, and I know you were there. It was a pretty long journey.
I think it took 18, 20 months or so.
18, 20 months, and it was really looking only at applicant tracking first. That was the thought, was we need a new applicant tracking tool, and then after they got into that 18-month period, it became, no, we're gonna do the whole full change out. So, and we're a PeopleSoft shop today, like I said, with a lot of highly customized, custom-built tools. So it morphed from just the applicant tracking to the full Oracle suite. And we did look at some other tool sets as well.
Any other questions? So, well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the panelists very much for the insights.